Hello and welcome to Grief Seeds, a podcast where you'll find insights, reframings, metaphors, and visualizations, all known as grief seeds, to help you cultivate growth and healing in your life after loss. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I'm an intuitive grief guide and author, and on this show, I'll share insights from my interactions with clients, wise words from fellow grievers, and personal stories from my own life, with the hope that they transform your grief as they have transformed mine. Because even when it doesn't feel like it, we are planting the seeds of growth in the midst of great pain and heartache. Your grief is welcome here. Hi there, grief growers, and thanks so much for joining me today on Grief Seeds. I've got a very useful one for you today, and that is 10 responses to the question, how are you? I cannot tell you how many times I have worked with clients, both one-on-one and in workshop settings, and they relay the dreaded kind of lumpiness that arrives in conversation when somebody that they know, or maybe even a perfect stranger, says, "Hey, how are you?" Because the default response societally is fine, but there is such a chasm between fine and what we're genuinely feeling in our grief. Fine can feel like a lie. Fine can feel like a mask. Fine can feel like operating by the default when all you really want to do, what your heart wants to do, is tell the truth of what's happening for you in your grief. So today I'm going to share with you 10 responses to how are you that I recently sent to a one-on-one client that I was working with. Here goes. Number 1, not the greatest, but I know I won't feel this way forever. So this tells the truth of what's happening for you. Hey, how are you? Not the greatest, but I know I won't feel this way forever. Acknowledges the temporariness of time, so that they don't try to cheer you up, or they don't have to do that for you. You got it covered. You know that emotions are an ocean, and they will change. Number 2, heavy, but I'm still standing. And this is one that I've seen and heard be helpful and truthful for a lot of people, especially as we continue to navigate the COVID pandemic. Heavy, there's a lot going on right now, and I am still capable of being a human. I still do things out in the world. I still work or watch the kids or present myself in public spaces. Number 3, surprisingly present, all things considered. And this one can be a nod towards your mental state or what's going on for you in your brain or behind the scenes. Surprisingly, I'm here mentally. I've got my feet on the ground. I am in this conversation. I am in this room with you right now. All things considered. It acknowledges the enormity of everything that you have going on, but also the reality that you are not totally separate from the world in which we all live together. Number 4, I've been having some dark days, but I appreciate you asking. In other words, don't ask me about my dark days, but thank you for genuinely being curious about what I'm going through right now. Number 5, total deflection. Hey, it's good to see you. Because what is how are you sometimes but a greeting? It's not necessarily an investment in how are you. Some people don't necessarily want to know your emotional state, or you're passing each other on the sidewalk or in the hallway and you don't actually have enough time to answer honestly, to catch somebody up on the details of your life. And so when somebody says, hey, how are you? Saying, hey, it's good to see you, can acknowledge the fact that they have greeted you and you are greeting them in return without actually having to answer the question as a question. Number 6, not so hot, but I know that things will change. And this one is really similar to number 1. It kind of acknowledges the temporariness of emotions and the temporariness of time as well. It's like, this is not a good season to be me, but I know that that won't be true forever. And this takes the pressure off of you and having to go deeper, but it also takes the societally implied pressure off the person who's listening to try and talk you out of your feelings. That's not their job. They don't need to do that. And so you have provided that space and that answer for them, so they don't have to offer you a cliche in return. Number 7, entirely honest and truthful. Sad. I'm having a mom day today, or I'm having a sibling day today, or I'm having a dead cat day today, or I'm having a my mom's dead day today, or a brother day today, or I miss my coworker day today. Just telling the truth. I'm having an I miss them day today. Number 8, tired. But thank you for checking in. That means a lot. Again, telling the truth, the honesty of where you're at right now. Tired, sad, weary. But thank you for checking in. That means a lot. There's a period on the end of that sentence. You have shown gratitude for their human interest in your human life on this earth, but it makes it so that if you do not want it to, the conversation does not have to go any further. Tired, but thank you for checking in. That means a lot. Number 9 is probably one of my favorites because it's kind of a joke. Hey, how are you? Still grieving. How are you? And that brings me so much joy because sometimes how are you feels a lot like a checkpoint in life. How are you? Are you over that thing yet? Is the subtext underneath that. And jokingly saying, even with laughter, even with sarcasm, if appropriate for the situation, still grieving. How are you? And inviting them into that space with you. Are you still grieving too? Is a wonderful way to invite people into the reality that grief doesn't necessarily end. And so just as you are allowed to continue to grieve, they are humorously, sarcastically, even seriously allowed to continue grieving as well. How are you? Still grieving. How about you? And in an ideal world, everyone would still be grieving and acknowledging the hard things that are happening for us every day. Number 10 is an honest answer to the question, but actually invites in further conversation. It's the only one of the 10 that does. And the response is, I have a long, complex answer to that question. Do you have space or time to hear it? And this is especially useful for people you plan on talking to. So for relatives that you appreciate hearing from, for coworkers who have a lot of emotional intelligence, even for doctors and medical professionals who are asking genuinely, how are you? How is your health? I am checking in on your status. I have a long answer to that question. Do you have the space and time to hear it? So you are more or less asking for their opt-in or their buy-in or consent to continue the conversation in a truthful, honest, and open-ended way. There's a lot of things I can say about that. I can tell you about my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health. Where would you like to start? I actually have a long answer to that. Would you like to walk into that with me? And they get the option, the ball's in their court now, whoever's listening, to say yes or to say no if they're strapped for time or they don't have the emotional space to hold for you at the moment. And it's a wonderful way to invite people who you would like to invite into further meaningful conversation with you when you're grieving. So grief growers, I invite you to use these in the next week or so and report back. Tell me how they worked. These 10 different responses to how are you. I'd love to know which one resonated with you the most, which one is a favorite of yours. If you came up with any of your own, I would always love to hear from you. Shelby at shelbyforsythia.com. Your suggestions for responses to how are you when you're grieving. I invite you to take a deep breath in with me here. And out. May you, grief growers, when approached with the question, how are you? See and acknowledge it for what it is. A greeting, a query, a check-in, a status update, a gesture of care, a norm, a ritual, a default. Whatever it is in that moment, I invite you to tune into your gut and your heart for wisdom on how to respond. I want to tell the truth in my grief. I don't want to say fine, because I'm not. I want people to know that this is still hard for me. I want to invite certain people into deeper conversation. I invite you today, maybe for the next 24 hours, maybe for the next week, if you're feeling a little more full of stamina this week in your grief growers, to tell the truth every time somebody asks, "How are you?" Whether they're a customer service representative or one of your closest family members, whether it's your boss or the person who delivers your mail. We'll close with a deep breath in here and out. And I'll ask you in this moment too, my dear grief grower, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me today on Grief Seeds. So that's all for this episode of Grief Seeds. Thank you so much for listening today. You can find additional grief support at shelbyforsythia.com or by following me on social media at shelbyforsythia on Facebook and Instagram. If this podcast helped you in your life after loss, please leave a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And be sure to share Grief Seeds with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for financially keeping this podcast on the air. If you'd like to support Grief Seeds on Patreon through a yearly or monthly pledge, you can do so at patreon.com/shelbyforsythia. My Patreon supporters get access to behind-the-scenes content, including a once-a-month grief support call with me and 5 90-minute workshops with topics decided by grievers themselves. Again, that website is patreon.com/shelbyforsythia. Music for Grief Seeds is performed by Addie Goldstein. As always, my dear grief growers, it was beautiful sharing this space and time with you today. I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world, and I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.